The investigation itself is a single page where we simply present official documents confirming what Yulia Navalny had previously mentioned. What we've all suspected regarding what really happened to Alexei Navalny is significantly different from the state's narrative that was provided later, and which cited official doctors. Specifically, the document we present lists symptoms, including sharp abdominal pain, vomiting, and convulsions. All these fit perfectly into the picture of poisoning by Novichok or another organophosphorus agent, and don't align with an abnormal heart rhythm as the cause of Navalny's death, which they previously tried to sell us without any evidence or expert analysis. Moreover, the documents that have been released show that various examinations were carried out, including forensic analysis of his stomach contents. There is an analysis we didn't publish, but it's available in the documents. There's an examination of food samples from the prison. It was evident that everyone understood this was related to toxicology. But none of this appears in the final documents. All of it was removed. They simply refused to open a criminal case. And the symptoms that we see in the first drafts of the documents that came into our possession were absent from the final versions. In essence, I listed all the symptoms: severe abdominal pain, vomiting, and rapid convulsions that began once the resuscitation efforts were underway. Convulsions can occur during a hypertensive crisis, a sudden increase in blood pressure, but the situation would look very different in that case, usually lasting for hours, often associated with brain swelling. Based on the description and after consulting with doctors, including intensive care specialists involved in resuscitation, they say that anyone familiar with hypertensive crises knows it doesn't look like this. There shouldn't be abdominal pain, for example. This picture is entirely inconsistent with the official account, whereas it closely matches poisoning by an organophosphorus agent. The only difference in this case would be ingestion through food or drink, unlike the 2020 incident where it was administered through skin contact with Novichok. If Navalny ingested it, everything would have unfolded in exactly this way. We have, in fact, several hundred, maybe even several thousand different documents related to Navalny's official case of death. Naturally, we cannot disclose our sources, but we can say this is not the final stage of the investigation. We are continuing to study the documents we have, and we still need to uncover the most crucial part, which of course isn't in the documents, but must be established through investigation: the names of the killers. To uncover these names, we need to trace flights, possible phone calls, and so on. Simply naming them, like Ivanov, Petrov, and Sidorov, wouldn't satisfy anyone. It's important to understand how everything was organized, how the order was given, and at what point it was given. I'm not sure we'll be able to reconstruct the entire chain of events. However, in the case of the first poisoning in 2020, we managed to trace the entire chain from the earliest attempts in 2017, including the initial flights of the FSB operatives. Tracking was easier back then, thanks to access to databases and calls. Now, everything is far more classified. However, I believe that Russians, and not just Russians, want to understand the bigger picture of what happened, meaning who was responsible, not only among the direct perpetrators, but also among those who issued and relayed the orders and so on. Firstly, a military-grade poison of this type can only be in the possession of the Russian authorities, and only the Russian authorities had access to Alexei Navalny. So there were never any external actors considered from the start. As for how it could be mixed into the food, there's no question about that. If someone had access to the prison, perhaps a prison staff member or an FSB officer could have added something to the food, knowing that Navalny would drink that water or eat that food. The substance has no color or odor, so administering it doesn't take any work. In the case of the Skripal poisoning, it was much more complicated. because it happened in an uncontrolled territory where the poison was applied to a door handle. Calculating how much and ensuring that the right people got the right dose was nearly impossible, especially since it was hard to avoid Yulia Skripal also touching the door handle. Here, however, the situation was far simpler. There was a specific cell, a specific water bottle passed to him, and that's it. The traces were then erased. I don't see any difficulty in this. It was a very convenient and controlled scenario. That's why, when Alexei Navalny returned to Russia, all our concerns were precisely that if the authorities wanted to attempt to poison him again, there was no way to prevent it. Even if you're as careful as possible, you have no control over choosing the food and have no ability to check anything. It was the most convenient situation for the authorities. On one hand, the authorities delayed handing over Navalny's body, while on the other, they didn't allow any samples to be taken for examination, even though it would seem that if they insist his death was due to natural causes, then they ought to allow any tissue or blood samples to be taken, allow a normal toxicological examination to confirm there's nothing suspicious. Instead, they wouldn't let anyone near the body, let alone provide samples themselves. From that point, it was clear they were behaving like criminals. Nevertheless, it's always good to have documentary evidence, like what's been published now.
The Insider's journalists continue their work despite pressure from Russian authorities. You can support them by liking this video, leaving a comment, and subscribing to our channel. If you'd like to further support their efforts, consider making a donation by clicking the link in the description below.